Picture a rocket heading off into space, gets off track. The only way it gets back on track is to fire those engines again. Now, maybe those firings weren't planned, right? But that's what it's going to take to get back on the trajectory that we want. Welcome to the Knowles Development Podcast. I'm Brad Knowles. Let's dive right into today's topic. And today I wanted to talk about seasons of a person's business. Not all businesses are running along the same way all the time. And each business, I would say, are going to go through a number of seasons. There's only a handful of those seasons that I'd like to talk about today because I think there are specific times when we have to put in more effort and more energy, okay? Now, I think there's probably some schools of thought out there of like, well, no, you got to be all in all the freaking time, and it's, it's always freaking Super Bowl. It's unrealistic to expect a person to sprint for a marathon. If you're serious about building a business that you're going to have for years, it's a marathon, not a sprint. However, there are times when we got to kick it in gear. We got to commit more time, more energy, and more effort. So I wanted to talk about those pieces today and kind of when those seasons happen, because you want to plan for it as best you can. So let's dive right in. First off, it's the launching of a business. I don't know anybody who launches a business and doesn't have to commit more time than they would ideally like to for the long haul, for that marathon run, right? So if you're about to launch a business, this is going to be a 12, 14, 16-hour day time of your life, 5 days a week minimum, maybe 6.5 days a week. I do think you're always going to want to have some unplugged time. Otherwise, what ends up happening is you don't stay your freshest. So you're not allowing your mind, body, and energy to recoup. So we can't do 12, 14 hours a day forever. We can't do it. So a little bit of a break in there, 6 days a week. Again, I know it's sounding like a lot to be working 12, 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. But when you're launching a business, that's probably to be expected. I had a great call with a person this morning who's relaunching their real estate career, and that was the expectation I said, where are you at with your wife on this? Right? It's a husband and wife, and we've got to have our partner on board with what this is going to look like. Now, here's the kicker. We're launching this business so that we can have a quality of life down the road. So it's a sacrifice that we're willing to make now, but we've got to do it in conjunction with each other. We've got to do it as a team. Our family, our kids, whoever it might be in your life, you need to be having that conversation with them ahead of time. Like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing and y'all ain't going to see me for a while, right? Those normal times when we were hanging out, I'm probably going to be burning the midnight candle. So the launch of a business should not be a surprise for any of us that is a time where we have to get out of balance or way off track in terms of how we would like our life to normally look, because it's going to require that initial input of energy. The same way, too, with our victim this morning, the relaunch. If your business, for whatever reason, has gotten to a place that's, let's call it stagnant, or perhaps it's beginning to backtrack, whatever it might be, to get back on the trajectory, because that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about getting back on the trajectory that we wish we'd had for our business. That's going to require an input of additional energy, additional time, additional effort. Picture a rocket heading off into space, gets off track. The only way it gets back on track is to fire those engines again. Now, maybe those firings weren't planned, right? But that's what it's going to take to get back on the trajectory that we want. So at that relaunch phase of a business, you got to have that same conversation. Like, hey, I got to start putting in more time to get where we want to go, to get back on track. Now, there also are the times when a business goes through a rebuild. I find the rebuild often happens when we have key people leave the organization for whatever reason. We used to say get hit by a bus. These days we're more likely to say, they hit the lottery. But people are going to come and go from your business. It's pretty rare now that you see people joining organizations where they have these 20, 30, 40-year careers with the same organization. That's pretty rare air, even for incredible companies with great culture. So don't knock yourself if 5 years in, 10 years in, you're having a fairly significant turnover in the talent and the people that you're in business with. So at that rebuild stage, many of us have been able to step out of the organization somewhat, dial back the amount of time we've spent compared to those launch or relaunch phases. And at rebuild time, I've lost maybe some key people. I've got to reinfuse my fingerprint on the kind of the culture, the direction that we're going in. Boom. Here we go. Back to those 12, 14-hour days, putting more energy in, putting more effort in. We got to get this sucker back on track as we rebuild with our new people. The last example I want to give you is when we have a major directional change. And this will happen in businesses, and the thing we're finding is that this happens with businesses more and more frequently now. The rate of change, the pace of change, obviously, is constantly increasing, right? So things are moving quicker and quicker, so the amount of kind of redefining or reinventing that any given business has to go through is happening more and more frequently. And when that happens, you, the person who's, whether you want to look at it at the top of the pile or the bottom of the pile, you, the person who owns and has, the arms wrapped around this organization, you're going to have to dive back in then. The amount of energy that it takes to set the new course, knowing that there's a lot of people vested in the organization on the old course. Right there, the delta between those two is where your grit, determination have to show up. Because here's the thing, here's why we're talking about this. When we go through these seasons of our business, we have to build momentum, and we have to build it quickly. Okay? So I want to give you the two best examples that I've seen of momentum. I'm going to first steal from John Maxwell, and our second will come from Good to Great. Obviously, great books, great authors. John's example is a freight train. And this is a fun one. So picture a freight train, 100 cars long. It's sitting standstill on the track. So that's your launch or your relaunch, right? Though it could be the rebuild, we've slowed way down, or the change of direction, right? We've got to get back up to speed, right? So we're this massive freight train, we're barely moving or not at all, and we've got to get that sucker going. Well, in that scenario, a 1-inch cube of concrete placed in front of the front wheel of that train will keep that train from ever starting. It can basically appear to the train as an insurmountable barrier to where it wants to go because we don't have any momentum. Take the same train, have it barreling down the tracks at 75 miles an hour, okay? When that happens, that same train can blast through a 5-foot thick steel reinforced concrete wall, and it's not even really going to slow down. Same train, same mass, same track, difference, momentum. We have to build momentum in our businesses quickly when we lose them or if we're just launching. And that momentum will get us over all of those little things that tear down a lot of businesses. Most small businesses fail in their first year or two. And it's not because it isn't a good idea. It's not because the people aren't smart. It's not because they don't have a good work ethic. It's usually not because of the normal things. It's they never got to the momentum phase. They never got to a point where there was so much energy going that there was just nothing that was going to slow them down. So let's look from the good to great example, and this is more the flywheel. So my machinists who are watching this, you're going to get this pretty quickly. But a flywheel is a piece of an engine or a large machine that, as the engine begins to move slowly, very slowly, painfully, begins to create rotations of this massive flywheel. Think of a disc of metal as big around as me. Okay, so a massive, maybe 6 foot, 8 foot in diameter flywheel takes a mountain of energy to get that thing around once. So you've got to put all this time and energy and focus into just getting it to one rotation. Real estate agents out there, that's your first closing. Think of all the time, effort, and energy it takes to get that first client to the closing table. It's incredible. It's exhausting. Many quit before they ever get there. For my attorneys out there, imagine that landing that first client, winning that first court case. It's the same thing, right? Property managers, winning that first big building, all the effort that it takes to go in and land a 28-unit complex. It's a mountain of effort getting that flywheel to just turn around once. But if we stay focused on it, if we continue to put our energy into that flywheel, it begins to rotate not only from our effort, but also from its own momentum. And that momentum builds, and it builds upon itself, so that as we put in energy, there's a cumulative effect of the energy that the thing itself is doing. And over time, all of a sudden, I had 5 closings in a day. I won 3 court cases this week. We just landed a 100-unit complex. Do you see what I'm saying? The momentum that we're able to build by getting a little out of balance, by putting in a disproportionate amount of time than we normally would at key seasons of our business, are critical to the business's survival. And we can't do it without our loved ones knowing what we're doing and being on board in that process. So when I say communicate it and communicate it quickly, I really mean it. Okay? Don't just start putting 14-hour days in and then be all surprised when your loved ones are pissed at you 2 weeks later. Have the conversation on the front end. That's what leaders do. And know that this is coming. There will be a rebuilding phase of your business that you can't see right now, but it will come, and it will require more effort. It will require more time. Because we need to rebuild that momentum. We got to get that train going. We got to get that flywheel going. We've got to build the momentum of our business and take it to the next level. You can do this. Know that it's coming, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.